every time that I think that it can't get worse, that the Russians can't do this too, I'm always surprised. So today is August 6th. It is Saturday, day 164 in Ukraine. Uh, a little good news, a little silver lining. The Amnesty Ukraine chief quits over the rights report we talked about in the last couple of days. Polchuk, the head of Amnesty International in Ukraine, said she tried to warn the watchdog's senior leadership that the report was one-sided. And she went on and said, if you don't live in a country invaded by occupiers who were tearing it to pieces, you probably don't understand what it's like to condemn the army of defenders. And I read the report, and the report was just so like, well, you can't be in a school because and now they're not holding up little kids. The schools were vacant, and they're using it for shelter. Well, why aren't you in the woods where there's no people around? Because I don't want to get killed. That's why. Amnesty's International Secretary Agnes Calamard, let's copy that name here because we're going to see it in a moment, responded to Polachuk's resignation, saying Osaka has been a valued member of Amnesty's staff and has led the Amnesty International Ukraine office for 7 years with significant human rights successes. We're sorry to hear that she's leaving the organization, but we respect her decision and wish her well. What? Okay, let's go back over to the Amnesty report. Here's the actual report. Here's Agnes talking. Well, we've documented a pattern of Ukrainian forces putting civilians at risk and violating the laws of war when they operate in populated areas. Like she's the one of the people doubling down on this, like the yes, you're not supposed to put civilians in harm's way. Stay out of hospitals. Stay out of schools as they're open or in a terribly populated area if you can avoid it. Like the article did say, if you can avoid it, international humanitarian law does not specifically ban parties to a conflict from basing themselves in schools that are not in session. Okay, and you want to not put these people at risk needlessly, but okay, so let's put her name again. She shows up at the very end. Last line of the entire thing. Military should never use hospitals to engage in warfare and should only use schools or civilians as a last resort where there's no viable alternatives. But this piece was like a hit piece that only focused on Ukraine, barely on Russia. There were like 3 or 4 paragraphs in the whole thing dealing with Russia. And so it was terribly lopsided. And then it was carried by RT, and I showed this over the last couple of days. It's carried by RT, and then it's carried by like an Indian something, just cutting and pasting RT, so it's getting great propaganda value. And as I explained over the last couple of days, there's the hot war, there's the propaganda war, there's the economic war, there's the political war, and it's all stacked up. Okay, let's get to the fresh atrocities now that we were going to be talking about, because this is just evil. Oh, by the way, before we do that, the EU condemned Russia's military activities around Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. Well, if Amnesty International is not going to talk about, okay, so Amnesty, they condemn Ukraine for being in unused schools, and that's drawing fire. But we have yet to condemn Russia for being around a nuclear power plant and firing artillery from there, to use that as a shield, which is again a war crime violation. This is a serious irresponsible breach of nuclear safety rules and another example of Russia's disregard for international norms. But Amnesty is not saying it, it's the EU chief. Okay, footage. Here's evidence one of even fresher evil that has surprised me. Footage appears to show a fresh atrocity against a Ukrainian POW. Now remember, they blew up a bunch of POWs in a detention center, and it's unclear who it is, but the evidence stacking up seems to indicate it was Russia. I could be wrong. Maybe I will be proven wrong later on, but it looks like. Okay, horrific video and photos have emerged that appear to show the head of a Ukrainian prisoner of war stuck on a pole outside a house in the eastern Ukrainian city of Popasna. This just popped up today. Ukrainian governor of Luhansk province, Sarai Hayde, posted this gruesome photo on his Telegraph channel. They really are orcs, the 21st century occupied Popasna. Human skull, reading right now, to its credit, says it does not confirm the authenticity of the photo, but the footage was originally posted on pro-Russian Telegram channels, and there's you'd put it there originally because you're trying to show your side, see what we're doing. And so, oh man, I just okay, let's keep going on. I'm not going to belabor it more. So we're talking about what happened last week on the 29th, I think, of July, July 29th. By the way, if you want to go back and see more of what's happened in the last few days, I post these every day. Here's more bias, a biased report. We're just talking about Amnesty International, who did it, and what's the information war, the information value of what's going on. The who did it, we're talking about what is going on right here. Okay, so here is evil number two for the day. So this is the account of a woman who has spent 100 days in the Olvinka detention center. This is where the explosion was on the 29th of January or July, just a few days ago, almost a week ago now. And she was captured, and we'll tell you why. And she looks like a hardened criminal. Screams from soldiers being tortured, overflowing cells, inhuman condition, a regime of intimidation and murder. And she's talking about what's going on in her experience. Anna Vorsheva, the 45-year-old Ukrainian entrepreneur, spent 100 days in Olvinka after being detained in mid-March at a checkpoint by the Russians. Well, why? She had been trying to deliver humanitarian supplies to Mariupol, her home city. She was held early in July on charges of terrorism. Terrorism for delivering humanitarian supplies. No doubt Russia cynically and deliberately murdered Ukrainian prisoners of war, she said. We are talking about absolute evil. Okay, Russia didn't want them to stay alive. I'm sure some of those killed in the explosion were already corpses. So that's pretty bad if that's what you're actually doing. It's a convenient way of accounting for the fact that they had been tortured to death. Well, if you blow them up, there's not remnants of their bodies anymore. Um, man, male prisoners were regularly removed from their cells, beaten, and then locked up again. We heard their cries. They played loud music to cover the screams. Torture happened all the time. Investigators would joke about it and ask inmates, "What happened to your face?" The soldier would reply, "I fell over," and they would laugh. We were frequently called Nazis and terrorists. The conditions for female inmates were also grim. It was the food, it was fit for pigs, she said. She suspected that the prison governor siphoned off money allocated for meals. Toilets overflowed. Women were given no sanitary products. The philosophy is everything's horrible for us, so everything should be horrible for you. It's all very communist. Okay, so that's her experience, her firsthand report of what it was like inside the prison, and that's inside the prison before it was even blown up, right? I mean, we're not even talking about the explosion of it itself. Okay, in other news, this is both National Review and you'll find it in the New York Post. So I'm showing you this from multiple perspectives to show you like this isn't just making stuff up. Russian state TV is claiming they had North Korea volunteering 100,000 North Koreans to come fight for Russia. So here's National Review. I'm going to look at it through this. By the way, if you're not an American and don't know what National Review is, it is a very conservative magazine that focuses on conservative things, but they don't just make stuff up. So you can do that with a liberal magazine who just doesn't make stuff up just as well, but it's a legitimate organization. North Korea has offered Russia 100,000 volunteers to aid in the war against Ukraine, according to Russian state TV. Well, why do they need that? Well, some estimates put the number of Russian soldiers killed as high as 15 to 25,000. Now, 15 to 25,000. Only 15,000 were killed in Afghanistan in 10 years of fighting. So 15 to 25,000. And 15 is the low estimate. 25,000 is a higher estimate from the UK. Killed, not wounded. Then you multiply by 2 or 3 to get the wounded numbers, and so that's why they need it. North Korea and Russia have experienced a close partnership after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, with North Korea being one of the only countries in the world to recognize the Donetsk People's Republic and the Luhansk People's Republic. The other country, other than Russia, is Syria, which is a great company to be in. So that's what's going on there. Okay, last thing, and I want to end on a more positive note because I feel awful right now after reviewing these issues because this is just such an atrocity after just unnecessary like demeaning of Ukraine with that Amnesty article. Okay, so Ukrainians thank North Macedonia for the supply of Soviet era tanks. Now, you probably can't even find North Macedonia on the map. So let me show you. Here it is, North Macedonia. It used to be part of Greece, like Philip of Macedon was Alexander the Great's father, and here is the former Yugoslavia. Okay, so it's hard to even picture it on the map until you see. Ukrainian president thanked North Macedonia for military aid. They're giving them a bunch of tanks, providing them these old Soviet tanks so that they can defend themselves. So I want to end on a bright note because, wow, I mean, just some of these things here, just evil after evil after evil. Head on a pike, really? We're in the 21st century. Anyway, thank you for your time. If you're still listening at this point, please consider subscribing. I do these daily. I'm trying to inform whoever's willing to listen about what's going on the ground, and I triangulate with different news articles intentionally trying to make sure that I'm seeing as clearly as possible. See you tomorrow.